In the spring of 1969, a farmer working near the town of Issyk, east of what is now Almaty, saw something flash inside a fresh line of soil. At first it looked like a small piece of metal. Then he pushed the dirt aside and saw gold, not a coin, not a modern object, a thin plaque shaped by hands that had disappeared more than 2,000 years earlier. The field was surrounded by ancient burial mounds, and the gold could mean only one thing. A grave had been disturbed. Archaeologists were called immediately. What they found inside the mound would become one of the greatest discoveries in the history of Central Asia. But the person beneath the gold would remain almost completely unknown for the next 57 years. The main chamber of the mound had already been robbed in antiquity. Whoever entered it centuries earlier had taken almost everything. That should have been the end of the excavation. But the thieves had missed a second burial hidden in the southern side of the mound. It was still sealed. Inside was a wooden chamber built from Tian Shan fir. On the floor lay the skeleton of a teenager. Around and above the bones were more than 4,000 gold ornaments. There were weapons, pottery vessels, a bronze mirror, and a silver bowl marked with 26 signs that no one has been able to read with certainty. The young person appeared to have been dressed from head to foot in gold. The image was so powerful that the individual quickly became known as the Golden Man. Yet almost every simple statement about him contained a hidden problem. Was he really a man? Was he a warrior, a prince, a priest, or something else? Did the gold belong to one royal family? Or could a talented young fighter earn such a burial? The bones suggested an age of about 17 or 18, but they did not preserve enough clear features to settle the question of sex. Some researchers saw a male warrior. Others noted that the tall headdress and elaborate jewelry resembled objects found with high-status women. The person became famous before science could even say with confidence whether Golden Man was the right name. Then, on July 3, 2026, a new study appeared in the journal Science Advances. Researchers had finally recovered genome-wide DNA from the Golden Man and compared it with ancient DNA from dozens of other Iron Age people buried across Kazakhstan and nearby regions. The result did more than answer the old question about biological sex. It exposed a pattern connecting gold-covered graves, distant cemeteries, children, women, brothers, grandparents, and marriages between relatives. The Golden Man was not simply a rich teenager. He belonged to a world in which power may have moved through bloodlines across enormous distances. And the strongest proof did not come from the gold. It came from the dead who were buried far away from him. To understand why this matters, we have to return to the burial itself. The Issyk cemetery lies roughly 50 kilometers east of Almaty, on the left bank of the Issyk River. Researchers have identified about 45 so-called royal mounds in the area. The main mound connected to the Golden Man was approximately 6 meters high and 60 meters across. That is not a simple pile of earth. It is a structure that required planning, labor, wood, transport, food for workers, and control over land. The burial was dated by radiocarbon evidence to around 400 to 300 BCE, during the late Iron Age Saka period. The gold was not placed randomly. Thousands of small plaques had once been attached to clothing, boots, a belt, and a tall pointed headdress. Many were shaped like animals: leopards, horses, birds, mountain sheep, and fantastic creatures. This style appears across the steppe and is often called Scythian or Saka animal style. The animals were not only decoration. They may have expressed movement, danger, protection, rank, and beliefs about the living world. The sword carried griffin heads. Similar griffin images have been found at other elite Iron Age sites. Even the clothing acted like a message. Anyone who saw this person alive or saw the body during the funeral would have understood that he stood inside a powerful social order. The silver bowl made the mystery deeper. It carried 26 carved signs, but the writing remains undeciphered. Without readable records, the Golden Man cannot tell us his name, title, or the events of his life. The Saka left no large surviving archive explaining who ruled, how leaders were chosen, or how families passed authority from one generation to the next. Their history has to be rebuilt from graves, weapons, horses, art, damaged bones, and now fragments of DNA. The bowl looks like a voice trapped in metal. It may contain a name, a dedication, or something ordinary. Until it is convincingly read, it remains silent. The people connected with this wider culture occupied one of the largest human landscapes on Earth. During the first millennium BCE, groups sharing related weapons, horse equipment, burial customs, and animal-style art stretched more than 3,500 kilometers from the Altai Mountains toward the Black Sea. Ancient Greek writers often use the name Scythians for Western steppe groups, while Persian and other Eastern sources use names connected with the Saka. Modern researchers use these labels carefully because this was not one simple nation with one ruler, one capital, and one uniform population. It was a wide cultural horizon containing many communities with different local histories. Popular images often reduce the Scythians and Sakas to horse-riding warriors appearing suddenly from empty grasslands. The truth was more complex. Their mobility depended on deep knowledge of seasons, pastures, rivers, mountain routes, animals, and trade. Their horse equipment was light, practical, and highly developed. Elite burials sometimes included sacrificed horses dressed in elaborate gear, showing that the animal was not only transportation, but also wealth, military power, identity, and ritual. A society that could move across vast territory was not disorganized. It required alliances, rules, memory, and people capable of coordinating families spread over great distances. The giant burial mounds reveal that some people controlled far more resources than others. In the Iron Age, the difference between elite and ordinary graves became extreme. A non-elite grave might be a low, simple mound with few objects. An elite kurgan could rise more than 12 meters and reach over 100 meters in diameter. It could include a long entrance passage, side rooms, horses, weapons, gold, and special treatment of the body. Such monuments could not be built quietly by one household. They required many workers, and probably displayed the ability of a family to command labor even after one of its members had died. For decades, archaeologists could see the inequality, but they could not see the system behind it. One possibility was merit. A brave rider might win status in battle. A successful leader might gather followers and earn a rich burial. Another possibility was inheritance. A small number of families might control authority, marriage, wealth, and the right to be buried inside the largest mounds. The burial of the Golden Man could support either story. He had weapons, so perhaps he had achieved fame. But he was also only about 17. Had he really lived long enough to earn a funeral involving thousands of gold pieces and a royal chamber? Or had his position been decided before he was old enough to prove anything? This was the question the 2026 genetic study was designed to test. The team assembled genome-wide data from 85 people who lived between about 900 and 200 BCE. 38 were classified as elite and 47 as non-elite. The researchers did not decide status from one gold earring or one large stone. They used a group of archaeological signs, including the size of the mound, the quantity of rich objects, horse burials, long entrance passages known as dromoi, and evidence of special treatment, such as post-mortem trepanation. A person generally had to meet at least 3 of these conditions to enter the elite category. That method was important because wealth exists on a spectrum. A grave can be damaged, looted, or partly destroyed. A person who was powerful in life may leave few objects if robbers reach the chamber first. A person buried with gold may have held ritual status rather than political power. The word elite is therefore a research tool, not a perfect label written by the ancient people themselves. The team tried to reduce the uncertainty by combining archaeology, physical anthropology, radiocarbon dating, and genetics rather than trusting one clue alone. Ancient DNA work begins with a problem. DNA does not wait peacefully inside a skeleton for thousands of years. It breaks into tiny fragments. Heat, water, soil chemistry, bacteria, excavation, storage, and human handling can damage or contaminate it. Researchers usually target dense parts of bone or teeth, work in controlled, clean laboratories, and search for damage patterns that help distinguish ancient molecules from modern contamination. Even then, the result may be low coverage, meaning scientists recover only a small fraction of the genome. That was the situation with the Golden Man. The new data were valuable, but they were not a complete, perfect genetic portrait. To estimate biological sex, researchers examined how DNA fragments map to the sex chromosomes. A typical genetic male has X and Y chromosome material, while a typical genetic female has 2 X chromosomes and no Y chromosome. The team compared the Golden Man's surviving reads across these regions. The pattern made a male assignment much more likely than a female one. The study therefore provides the strongest scientific evidence so far that the teenager was genetically male. But the researchers were careful. The DNA coverage was low, so the best wording is most likely male, not an absolute claim that every uncertainty has disappeared. That result settled one famous debate, but it did not reveal a hidden alien ancestry or a completely separate royal race. Genetically, the Golden Man fell within the variation of other Iron Age Saka individuals. He showed a slight shift toward ancestry related to ancient populations south of the steppe, often discussed through links to the Bactria Margiana archaeological complex, or BMAC-related ancestry. Because his genome coverage was limited, researchers could not make a highly precise estimate of that contribution. What they could say was that he belonged inside the broad genetic world already associated with the Saka, not outside it. The wider genetic picture was a mixture. Individuals in the study could be modeled through different proportions of ancestry connected with the eastern steppe, the western steppe, and populations related to southern Central Asia. This should not be surprising. The steppe was a corridor, not a wall. People, animals, technologies, and marriage partners moved through it for centuries. The Scythian Saka world was culturally connected but genetically diverse. Even people buried under similar objects and mounds could carry different combinations of ancestry. One of the most important findings was what the researchers did not see. Elite and non-elite people were not two completely separate ancestry groups. The gold-covered ruling class did not appear to be a foreign biological population, sitting above unrelated local people. Their broad ancestry components overlapped. Status was not simply explained by one special genetic origin. The difference appeared not in who their distant ancestors were, but in how closely the elite were related to one another. The team searched for close family relationships using several genetic methods. They looked for patterns expected between parents and children, siblings, grandparents and grandchildren, and more distant relatives. They also searched for long segments of DNA inherited from a shared ancestor. These are called identity by descent segments. The longer and more numerous the shared segments, the more recently two individuals are likely to have shared family members. In living people, family records can confirm this. In Iron Age burials, the DNA itself becomes the family record. The analysis identified multiple first-degree and second-degree relationships. But the most revealing pattern appeared when the cemeteries were placed on a map. Elite relatives were linked across different burial sites. Some were separated by more than 100 kilometers. People buried near each other were not always the closest family. Instead, a high-status person in one region could be more closely related to another high-status person far away than to an ordinary individual buried at the same cemetery. The elite were forming a network across the landscape. The clearest family begins with a man known only by the laboratory code AKB001. He was buried at Akbait and was older than 55 when he died. His mound stood about 3 meters high and 25 meters across. Gold objects accompanied him, and his skull showed post-mortem trepanation, meaning a hole had been made after death, probably as part of special treatment of the body. DNA showed that this man had a brother buried at Nurkin in another elite mound, but the family connection did not stop with the brothers. AKB001 was also the grandfather of two people buried at Karashoki. One was an adult man, between about 45 and 55 years old. The other was a child only 1 year old. The child was placed beneath a mound about 2 meters high and 32 meters across, with a formal entrance passage. The burial had been looted, yet enough evidence survived to classify it as elite. The child's skull had also received post-mortem trepanation. Whatever that ritual meant, it was being performed on someone who had barely learned to walk. That 1 year old child is more important to the mystery than almost any gold object. A baby cannot win a battle. A baby cannot build a political alliance, become a famous horseman, control trade routes, or earn a grand funeral through personal achievement. Yet this child received the architecture and treatment of high rank. The DNA then connected him to an elite grandfather and an elite great-uncle buried in other cemeteries. The family held privileged burial status for at least 3 generations, across sites located roughly 50 to 140 kilometers apart. This is direct evidence that rank could be inherited. The Golden Man was not identified as a relative of this particular family. Researchers found no confirmed close kin connection for him in the available dataset. That detail matters. The study does not prove that every elite person belonged to one giant dynasty, and it does not trace the Golden Man's parents or children. Instead, his young age and enormous burial fit a larger system revealed most clearly by other families. The Golden Man's DNA helps place him inside the Saka population and suggests he was male. The wider dataset explains the social world that could bury a 17-year-old like a king. The genetic evidence also suggested that some elite families chose partners from a limited circle. Researchers examined runs of homozygosity, long regions where a person inherited similar DNA from both parents. Very long runs can indicate that the parents were close relatives. Several elite individuals appeared to be the children of first cousin relationships, uncle-niece or aunt-nephew relationships, or second cousin unions. Most people in the study did not show this pattern, so close relative marriage was not universal, but it appeared more strongly among the elite. Among individuals who carried these runs, elites had about 3.5 times more of them on average, and the blocks were roughly 6 times larger than in non-elites. The researchers also estimated a much smaller effective population size for the elite genetic group than for the non-elite group. This does not mean only a few thousand elite people literally existed. Effective population size is a genetic measure shaped by how many individuals contributed descendants and how closely they were related. The result points toward a narrower marriage network and greater endogamy among high-status families. Why would powerful families marry relatives? The study cannot tell us their thoughts, but dynasties across history have often used controlled marriages to protect wealth, ritual authority, land rights, alliances, and claims to leadership. On the steppe, where communities moved and political units could change quickly, kinship may have provided stability. A marriage between connected elite branches could strengthen control over distant territories. It could also prevent powerful outsiders from entering the ruling network. Yet the same strategy could reduce genetic diversity and increase the risk of inherited conditions. The DNA shows the pattern, not the exact motive. Then the study produced another result that challenges the traditional picture of steppe power. 16 of the 38 elite individuals were genetically female, about 42%. These women were not placed in minor graves beside powerful men. Some were buried in large mounds with rich objects, horses, formal entrance passages, and the same special treatment seen among elite males. Nearly half of the high-status sample was female, making it difficult to describe the society as a simple line of male warriors passing power only from father to son. One example was the so-called Princess of Urdzar, a woman who died at roughly 30 to 35 years of age. She was found in eastern Kazakhstan in 2013, wearing an elaborate gold headdress with animal-style ornaments, similar to objects connected with the Golden Man. A stone altar and remains of medicinal plants were also found in her burial, and have been interpreted as evidence of a ritual or shamanic role. Her grave shows why the earlier debate over the Golden Man's sex was reasonable. Rich gold, weapons, tall headwear, and authority were not restricted to men. Researchers also found no clear genetic sign of a simple patrilocal or matrilocal system. In a strongly patrilocal society, women usually move to live with the husband's group. In a strongly matrilocal one, men usually move. Such patterns can sometimes appear in genetic diversity across male and female lines. Here, the signal was not clear. That suggests elite organization was more complex. Power may have moved through extended families, marriages, siblings, maternal connections, paternal connections, and alliances between different branches, rather than one strict rule. This changes how we should imagine the word dynasty. It may not have looked like a later kingdom, with a written list of kings sitting in one palace. The Saka were mobile, and their authority may have been distributed through related households controlling different regions. A grandfather could be buried in one cemetery, his brother in another, and his descendants in a third. The great mounds then acted like permanent claims in a moving world. Families could travel, but the monuments remained, marking land, ancestry, and the right to be remembered. This is an interpretation supported by the geographic kinship pattern, not a direct written statement from the Saka themselves. The treatment of elite bodies adds another strange layer. Post-mortem trepanation and signs of mummification appeared in elite contexts. A hole made in the skull after death may have helped remove tissue or slow decomposition, possibly allowing a body to be preserved or transported before burial. If high-ranking people died far from their chosen cemetery, preservation would make it possible to return them to a family burial center. The study does not prove one purpose for every case, but the combination of distant relatives, centralized elite cemeteries, and special body treatment raises a haunting possibility. Some of these dead may have traveled across the steppe before reaching their final mounds. Imagine the funeral of the Golden Man around the 4th century BCE. A teenager dies. His body is prepared. A tall headdress is assembled with gold animals and arrows. Thousands of plaques are fixed to clothing. An iron sword and dagger are placed beside him. A bronze mirror, vessels, pottery, and the unreadable silver bowl enter the chamber. Fir logs from the Tian Shan form the walls. The southern grave is closed, and a mound rises above it. Whether he died in battle, illness, accident, or ritual remains unknown. But the scale of the burial tells us that his death was a major social event. The gold may have announced more than personal wealth. It may have told every witness that the family remained powerful even after losing a young member. If rank was hereditary, the funeral was not simply honoring the dead, it was protecting the living dynasty. The animals on the clothing, the weapons, the height of the headdress, and the mound itself created an image of authority. The teenager's short life did not reduce the burial. That is exactly what we would expect if status came from birth. But the DNA does not tell us that the Golden Man was a king. Royal is often used because the burial is extraordinarily rich, not because an inscription names him as a monarch. He could have been the child of a ruling family, a warrior priest, a ceremonial figure, or a high-status member of an elite branch. He may have held authority personally, or the funeral may reflect the authority of his relatives. The genome gives us biological sex and population placement. It does not give us a job title. It also does not explain the exact meaning of the headdress. The tall pointed form is associated with Saka identity in art and historical descriptions, but each gold symbol can support several interpretations. Snow leopards, birds, horses, arrows, and horned animals may refer to protection, sky, mountains, warfare, ancestors, or sacred map of the world. Modern reconstructions are based on the positions of the ornaments in the grave, yet the original fabric and many organic parts have disappeared. What we see in museums is a careful reconstruction, not the untouched clothing lifted whole from the earth. The discovery later became a national symbol of Kazakhstan. Reconstructions traveled to museums around the world. Winged horses connected with the Golden Man's crown entered national imagery, and a statue was raised in Almaty. This modern importance can make the scientific debate emotionally charged. The Golden Man is no longer only one ancient teenager. He represents heritage, national identity, artistic skill, and the deep history of the steppe. Yet the best way to respect that importance is not to turn every possibility into a fact. It is to separate what the burial shows, what the DNA suggests, and what remains unknown. What is established is powerful enough. The individual was buried around 400 to 300 BCE in an undisturbed side chamber. He was about 17 or 18. What remains uncertain is equally important. We do not know his name. We do not know his cause of death. We do not know whether he fought in war. We do not know whether he was married, whether he had children, or which surviving skeletons belonged to his parents. The study detected no close relative for him in the current sample. We do not know what the 26 signs on the silver bowl say, and because the genome coverage was low, researchers cannot yet build a precise map of every part of his ancestry. The study also has wider limits. 85 individuals are a major ancient DNA dataset, but they cannot represent every Saka or Scythian community across thousands of kilometers in 7 centuries. Cemeteries preserve selected people, not entire living populations. Elite graves are easier to notice and excavate because they are large, while many ordinary graves may be damaged or undiscovered. Looting changes the evidence. The researchers created careful rules for status, but an ancient person's real social role cannot always be reduced to a mound's height and a count of objects. Even the genetic family tree is incomplete. Ancient DNA survives unevenly. A missing parent may simply lie in an unexcavated mound, in a destroyed grave, or in a sample that produced no usable DNA. Distant relatives can be detected only when enough genome is recovered. The absence of a connection is not proof that no connection existed. That is why the Golden Man can fit the pattern of hereditary elite status without being linked directly to the Akbate-Karashoki family. The network we see is only the part that survived. Future research could change the picture again. Better sequencing may recover more DNA from the Golden Man and refine his ancestry. Isotope analysis could test where he spent his childhood and whether he moved before death. Proteins in teeth and bones may provide information where DNA is weak. New excavations could identify relatives. Improved imaging could reveal injuries or disease. A convincing reading of the silver bowl might finally provide a personal name or title. Each method answers a different question, and no single test can reconstruct a whole life. The most surprising result of the study is therefore not simply that the Golden Man was male. It is that the steppe, often imagined as a place where authority belonged to whoever was strongest on horseback, also contained deeply rooted systems of inherited privilege. Mobility did not erase dynasty. Families could spread across huge spaces while remaining biologically and politically connected. Gold did not move only through trade. It moved through kinship. Monumental graves did not honor only achievement. Some honored birth, and the 1-year-old child proves it. Beneath a mound 32 meters across lay someone who had no victories, no long career, and no personal following. Still, one final mystery remains. If the Golden Man belonged to a powerful family network, where are the others? Are his parents hidden in one of the 45 royal mounds around Issyk? Was the sibling buried tens or hundreds of kilometers away? Did ancient relatives move his body back to a sacred family cemetery? Or did his branch disappear so completely that no matching DNA has yet been found? The new study opened the first page of his genetic story, but the family itself is still missing. More than 2,000 years after the chamber was sealed, the gold still catches the eye. But gold can only show that someone was important. DNA can reveal why. In the case of the Golden Man, the answer appears to lead away from one heroic teenager and toward a hidden system of families that controlled status across the steppe. The burial was not only a treasure chamber, it was a statement of inheritance, made in wood, iron, animals, and thousands of pieces of gold. So who was the Golden Man? The most honest answer is now clearer, but not complete. He was most likely a young Saka male buried at the highest level of society, inside a culture where elite status could pass through connected family lines. He was not proven to be a king, and his name is still lost. But his age, burial, and DNA now point toward a world where power began before achievement and continued after death. Not even the unreadable bowl. The real secret may be the family whose members have not yet been found. If archaeologists discover the Golden Man's parents or siblings in another distant cemetery, would that prove his family ruled a larger territory than anyone imagined? Share your theory below and subscribe to Past Proof, because the past is gone, but the evidence remains.